Most farm families are good at planning. They plan for seed, they plan for fertilizer, they plan for weather, harvest, machinery, land rent, operating loans, and the next farming season. But retirement? A lot of times that gets pushed off by saying, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out later. But here's the thing. We'll figure it out later is not a retirement plan. And the farm cannot always be the only answer, because what happens when the farm check is not there anymore? What happens when mom and dad need monthly income, but the next generation also needs cash flow to survive? What happens when one spouse passes away? What happens when there is a health event? What happens when someone is put on life support and you as the family suddenly have to make decisions you never wanted to talk about? That is when you find out whether you had a plan or whether you were just winging it. Today, we are talking about retirement readiness for farm families, not just annuities or life insurance, not just Social Security or land rent or estate documents. We are talking about the whole shebang, the toolbox, because retirement readiness is not about quitting the farm. It is about knowing where the income will come from, who has authority to act, and whether your family has enough clarification to keep a hard season from becoming a family war. Welcome back to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast, where we talk about farm transition, family legacy, succession planning, and the conversations that can protect the people and the land you care about. Today's episode is called Retirement Ready or Just Winging It. Where will the income come from? This is one of those topics that sounds practical on the surface, but underneath it all, there is a lot of emotion, because in farm families, retirement is different. For a lot of farmers and ranchers, retirement does not mean moving to Florida, golfing every day, and never thinking about the farm again. Sometimes retirement means stepping back from the daily decisions. Sometimes it means renting out the land or selling on contract for deed. Sometimes it means helping during the busy seasons, but not carrying the whole load and responsibilities. Sometimes it means becoming more of a mentor to the successors than the main operator. But no matter what retirement looks like, one question has to be answered. Where is the income going to come from? Because if that question is not answered, the farm transition is not ready. You can have all of the best laid intentions in the world. You can love your kids and your family. You can want the farm to continue. And you can say, someday this will all be yours. But if mom and dad still need the farm income to live, and the next generation needs that same farm income to grow the operation, somebody is going to feel squeezed. And we're not talking about don't squeeze the Charmin squeezed. We're talking about the kind of squeezed where cash flow is tight, family conversations get very uncomfortable, and everyone feels the pressure. That is when you realize retirement readiness is not just about money. It is about protecting the farm, the family, and the next generation from getting trapped in a plan nobody actually penciled out. And usually that pressure shows up as conflict. So today we're going to walk through the retirement ready mindset and the tools in the toolbox, and why power of attorney and decision-making documents matter just as much as the financial side. I think one reason farm families avoid talking about retirement is simply because hearing the word retirement sounds like a death sentence. It feels like talking about their own mortality. It feels like saying, I'm done. And it feels the pressure that, I can't even think about that. And for a lot of farmers, that is hard as heck to hear. The farm is not just a job. It is their identity. It is the rhythm that they beat to every day. It's the purpose. It's what they get up for. It is what you have built, protected, and stressed and worried about and worked for your entire life. So when someone says, you need a retirement plan, it feels like they're saying, you need to leave. But that's not what retirement readiness means. Retirement readiness means you are prepared to change roles, put a different hat on without creating chaos for the family. You might still be involved in the day-to-day operations. You might still help. You might still own the land. You might still mentor your successors. But the farm should not have to support 2 full generations with no plan, no running the numbers with the pencil, and no written agreement. That is where families get into trouble. The older generation says, we still need income. The younger generation says, we can't afford to grow. The parents say, we gave you an opportunity. And the kids say, we worked for years and still do not own anything. And pretty soon, what should have been a transition becomes resentment. So the first retirement readiness question is not, are you done farming? The first question is, what role or hat are you going to wear? And what role are you going to move into next? And how will that role be paid for? Here is what I want families to be honest about. A lot of farm families have spent years reinvesting everything that they've made back into the operation, whether it's been buying equipment, acquiring more land, putting up more bins, better livestock handling facilities, more inputs, more debt. They took on more risk to make more money. And that is not always a bad thing. That may have been what was needed to keep the farm going, to have that operating cash. But if every dollar has always gone back into the farming or ranching operation, then retirement gets very uncomfortable to talk about. Because now the farm has to do three things at once. It has to support the retiring generation, the current owners. It has to support the incoming generation, those successors that want to come in and take over their operation. And it has to support the operation itself. That's a huge load. So instead of asking, can the farm pay for everything? We really need to sit back and ask, what other tools do we have in the toolbox? So when I talk about tools, maybe that's Social Security income. Did one of the spouses work off of the farm throughout the years? Maybe there's a pension plan. Maybe there's other retirement accounts, IRAs or 401ks. Maybe it's cash rent or share crop for the land. Maybe it's a contract for deed that you're selling your land on, or maybe it's installment payments for the machinery that you're selling. Maybe it's other life insurance products. Or is it off-farm income? Is someone still working a little bit to bring in some extra income? Maybe it's whatever other investments that you have. So it could be a combination of several things. The point is, not every family needs the same tool. The point is that every family needs to have some tools. Because when the farm is the only source of retirement income, it becomes a huge tug-of-war issue. And when the farm becomes a tug-of-war, your family pays the price. This is where I would encourage every farm family to sit down and do something that sounds simple, but can be very eye-opening. Write down your income sources, not in your head, not someday. Someday is not a day of the week. Not, I think we'll be fine. Write them down. What comes in every month? What income do you have coming in monthly? What income comes in only once a year? What is your guaranteed income source? And what depends on crop or livestock prices? What depends on cash rent or share crop? What depends on the next generation making payments? What changes if one spouse passes away? What changes if someone goes into a nursing home? What changes if land has to be sold to pay for a spouse's care? Because there is a huge difference between having assets and having income. A farm family can look rich on paper and still be cash poor. You can have land, buildings, machinery, equity, but if none of it produces reliable income for the retired generation, then the family will still be under pressure. That is why retirement readiness matters. It gives the older generation peace of mind. It gives the younger generation a fair shot at operating the business. And it gives the whole family a better chance at having conversations based on numbers instead of emotion. Okay, when I say tools in the toolbox, I mean families need options. And not every tool fits every farm. Not every tool fits every family. Not every tool fits every stage of life. But here are some questions to ask. So keep these in mind. If you have Social Security coming in, how much is it? What are you getting for your monthly expenses? Is Social Security enough? Do you know when you plan to claim it? Do you understand how much it will provide for? Do you have other retirement accounts? Do you know how those withdrawals will be taxed? Do you know when you're required to start taking money out of any sort of retirement accounts if you have an IRA or a 401k or 403b? Do you have land that can produce rent? Will that be cash rent, crop share, or another arrangement? Could a contract for deed provide income to the retiree generation while giving the next generation a path to ownership? Will machinery be sold, gifted, leased, or bought over time? Is there life insurance in place to protect the spouse or create liquidity to use cash value? Is there a plan for health care or long-term care? Do both spouses understand where the money is, who to call, and how the bills get paid? And here's a big question. Can the plan survive a bad year? Because most of us are seeing severe drought and fires right now. So if you have one plan in mind, do you have another plan to survive a bad year? A transition plan that only works in a perfect year is not much of a plan at all. And farm families know better than anyone that perfect years are not guaranteed. So when you build a retirement plan, you need to think about making it flexible. Think about your backup plans, your plan A, B, C, D. You need to think about what happens if income is lower and expenses are higher. You have health changes or family conflict comes knocking at the door. How prepared are you? Sometimes when we talk about retirement income, the younger generation gets nervous. They hear mom and dad say, we need income. And they wonder, does that mean we will never be able to afford this? And yeah, that's a fair concern. Because if the retiring generation expects the farm to provide unlimited support, the next generation may never get ahead. But the answer is not to ignore mom and dad's needs. The answer is to build a plan that's fair, it's clear, it has to be realistic. The retiring generation should not have to live in fear. The next generation should not have to operate under a mystery. And the farm should not be expected to carry promises that nobody has penciled out. That is why you need the hard numbers. What do mom and dad actually need to live on? What can the farm actually afford? What should be paid as rent? What should be paid as a purchase price? What should be structured as installments? What should be handled outside the farm entirely? When you answer those questions, you move from emotion to having a plan. And that is where better conversations start. Now, I want to shift into another piece of retirement readiness that people sometimes overlook until it is too late, and that is power of attorney. And really, I'm talking about all of the decision-making documents from financial power of attorney, healthcare directives, wills, trusts, executor, personal representatives, trustees, backup alternative decision makers. These documents are not just the legal paperwork, they are instructions for the hardest days your family may ever face. And I want to share a story from a friend that really brings this home. She said, when my uncle was injured and put on life support, my dad was appointed as his power of attorney. Well, that was probably prior to him being put on life support, because he had to be sound mind and body. So it sounded like a simple job to dad. Just carry out his wishes, right? Here's the power of attorney, pay his bills, take care of his financial affairs. But when the uncle passed away, the cousin, which was the son to the uncle, started fighting everything, taking things from the house, ignoring the will. It turned into this huge emotional and legal mess. And she watched her dad go through something that she never thought he would have to deal with. And that taught her something. Being someone's power of attorney isn't just about the legal documents. It's about being willing to stand up and fight for what that person wanted, even if it's not fun. It can be uncomfortable. So if you're choosing a power of attorney, pick someone who not only cares for you, but who has a backbone to stand strong when things get complicated. And I want to add one more important clarification here. A power of attorney applies only while someone is living. After death, that power of attorney authority typically shifts to the executor of your estate, the personal representative, a trustee, or depending on the estate plan and the state law. Typically, a power of attorney ceases at death. But the lesson in that story still stands. So the person you name in your documents needs to be someone who can absolutely handle the pressure. Because when those emotions are high, people do not always behave well. Sometimes people take things from the house. Sometimes people ignore the will. They don't handle what was written down in the document with what assets are supposed to go to which individual. Sometimes people try to rewrite their own family history. Sometimes siblings who got along fine before now do not because the referee in the room has passed away. Sometimes in laws get involved. Sometimes old wounds come out at the worst possible time. And during these times, the person you choose has to be able to stand firm, not rude or controlling. And we're not getting on a power trip here, but they need to be very steady. They need to be able to say, this is what they wanted. This is what they put in writing. This is what we need to follow their plan. Even if you don't like it, we need to follow the plan. So it's not an easy job. So when you choose a power of attorney, executor, trustee, healthcare decision makers, do not only ask who wants to care for me and loves me. Ask who has the backbone to carry this responsibility when things get complicated and the vultures come knocking. A lot of families automatically choose the oldest child, or the child who lives the closest, or the child who is the nice one, or the child who won't make waves. They'll just be holding hands, singing kumbaya around the campfire. But that may not always be the right choice. The right person is not always the oldest. It's not always the loudest. It's not always the person that wants the job. The right person is someone who is trustworthy, organized, has to be emotionally steady, and is willing to follow your wishes. They need to be able to keep records. They need to be able to work with all your advisors, the attorneys, the accountants, financial advisors, bankers, other family members. They need to be able to set aside their own feelings from your instructions. And they need to have enough of that backbone to handle any conflict that might come up. Because sometimes protecting someone's wishes means telling another family member, no. That's hard because it is a lot harder when the documents are unclear, outdated, missing, or sitting in a drawer where nobody can even find them. So part of retirement readiness is not just about signing the documents. It is making sure the right people know they have been chosen, they understand their duties and responsibilities, and know where to find those documents when the time comes. So if you're listening today and wondering where to start, here's a simple retirement readiness checklist for farm, ranch, and business families, or anyone doing estate planning. First, know your monthly income need. What does it actually cost to live? No guessing games, not we don't spend that much. No, you need to know your numbers. Second, know where the income is going to come from. Is it Social Security, pension plans, retirement accounts, land rent, farm sale payments, contract for deeds, any other savings or investment, insurance type of accounts? Third, separate farm income from household retirement income. The farm may be a part of the plan, but it should not be the whole entire plan if that puts too much pressure on the next generation to be able to keep the operation moving. Fourth, protect the surviving spouse. Does the plan still work if one spouse dies first? Does the surviving spouse know where the accounts are, who to call, and how bills are paid? Fifth, review your legal documents. Do you have a current will, trust if needed, financial power of attorney, healthcare directives, who is listed as your executor or trustees, and who are the alternates? Who are the backup decision makers if the original people you have listed are no longer able or willing to serve in that capacity? Six, choose people who can stand strong. Do not choose someone only because they are family. You do not need to choose family members. Choose someone who can follow your wishes when the room gets uncomfortable. Seventh, put the farm transition in writing. A handshake and someday this will all be yours are not enough. Your family needs clarity. Eighth, talk about the plan before it is a crisis. The middle of a hospital stay, a funeral home room, or a family fight is not the best time to explain what you meant. Ninth, review the plan regularly. Families change, laws change, tax rules change, health changes, farm finances change. A plan that made sense 10 years ago may not be a fit today. I always recommend to my clients make sure you're reviewing your plan at least every 5 years or if there's been a life change. And 10th, remember what this is really about. This is not just about the money. It's about protecting relationships. It's about reducing confusion in your family. It's about giving the next generation a fair path. It's about making sure your spouse is cared for. It's about leaving peace in the family instead of creating a family feud. I know these conversations are not easy, and it's hard to talk about retirement. It's hard to talk about death and our own mortality. It's hard to talk about who gets authority. It's hard to talk about money in general. It's hard to look at your kids and say, here's the plan, especially if you know someone may not like it. But silence does not protect your family. Silence usually just delays the conflict until the people who knew the answers are no longer able to explain them. That is why retirement readiness matters. Because when you know where the income will come from, the farm transition gets clear. When your documents are updated, your family has a clear direction. When the right people are named, your wishes have a better chance of being honored. And when you have the hard conversations ahead of time, you give your family that gift of knowing what your wishes are. Maybe not a gift that they enjoy in the moment, but someday when life gets hard, they may look back and say, I remember when we had that hard conversation. Yeah, it was uncomfortable to be talking to mom and dad about this, but I'm sure glad I know what they wanted and why they did it this way. For listeners who feel overwhelmed, start right here. This week, write down every possible retirement income source that you have, where the money comes from besides the farm. Next week, gather all your important documents, wills, power of attorneys, healthcare directives, leases, deeds, loan documents, retirement account statements, bank statements, insurance policies, any written agreements. Gather all those up. So in the next 30 days, then contact me and let's review where you are today. We can look at what tools are already in your toolbox, where the gaps may be, and what questions you need to ask before meeting with your advisor team, your accountants, your attorneys, your insurance professionals, your bankers. And within 90 days, let's hold that family meeting. Let's not wait for a hospital room or funeral home or a family conflict to force the conversation. Do not try to fix everything in one afternoon. Just stop winging it. Because retirement readiness is not about having every answer today. It is about knowing where to start, who to call, and what needs to be put in writing. Okay, before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with an easy-to-use retirement readiness checklist. You can find this on my website at pathfinderlegacy.com. This is not about using one type of income source or saying every family needs the same plan. It's about making sure you know where the income comes from, who has authority to act, and whether the next generation has a real path forward. Because the farm may be part of that retirement plan, but it's not the only tool in your toolbox. At the end of the day, retirement readiness is not about walking away from the farm. It is about making sure you are not winging it when it comes to income, decision-making, family protection, and the future of the farm. So this week, ask yourself, are you retirement ready? Or are you just winging it? Do you know where the income will come from? Do you have the tools in your toolbox outside of the farm? Do you have the right documents in place? Have you chosen the right people to carry out your wishes? And have you had the conversations that could protect your family later? Because winging it might work like WD-40 or duct tape to fix a broken gate, but it is not a strategy for retirement, transition, or legacy. You need to prepare to protect the farm, protect your family, and protect the legacy you've worked so hard to build. Thanks for joining me today on the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast. If this episode made you think about your own farm's future, consider sharing it with a family member or a friend who could use the help. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones that matter the most. Until next time, I'll see you between the ditches.
Thanks for listening to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast, where your future is our focus. Be sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and visit us at pathfinderlegacy.com to start building your transition plan today.